Welcome to Community Church of New York online. This is our chalice lighting.
Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing, show to us beauty, vision, and joy.
We light this candle, the flame of our heritage. May it ignite hope in our lives, in our community, and in the world.
Unto the Church Universal, which is the depository of all ancient wisdom and the school of all modern thought, which recognizes in all prophets a harmony, in all scriptures a unity, and through all dispensations a continuity, which abjures all that separates and divides and always magnifies humanity and peace, which seeks truth in freedom, justice in love, and individual discipline in social duty, and which shall make of all persons, sects, classes, nations, and races one beloved community, unto this church and unto all its members, known and unknown throughout the world, we pledge the allegiance of our hands and hearts.
Hi there. Welcome again to Community Church of New York online. So obviously we're going to be doing things a little bit differently during this time of the coronavirus and self-isolation, social distancing. So let's talk about something important. Let's talk about community and how we can do it together, even in situations where we can't physically be together. So let's talk about covenants. When I was growing up in a Unitarian Universalist church in Binghamton, New York, there was a ritual that we did every year that people honestly didn't really like much. So we would covenant. We would moan and we would groan and we would pull out this huge piece of paper and some markers, and we would go ahead and list all of the rules from last year. And that's what it felt like. It felt like rules. It did not feel like a covenant maybe should. So we would go ahead and we would list all of the rules from last year. We would particularly list those things that as a youth group we had literally no control over. Things that the church demanded or things that our parents demanded. Things like, for example, no physical violence, which you would think was not such a big deal, but you know, there was that one time that Sarah punched Nick in the middle of the youth room for stealing her boyfriend, and that was not so great. It was good to have a rule about that. Good to have a covenant that did not accept that. But also, we had rules and covenantal promises that we would choose. We would choose things like be kind to one another and don't interrupt each other, which is kind of a difficult one. We would even covenant to do some really cool things over the course of the year, like a regional conference or a river rafting trip, which maybe wasn't such a good idea given that there was some drama that happened on it, but it was still really fun to plan, and it was good for a lot of people. Now, I think everyone in a UU church has had that time when they've thought, ugh, covenants, why are we doing this? After all, we're all adults here. We know how to act like adults with one another. We know how to be kind and be generous and be good about following proper timelines and getting projects done. So why do we need covenants? What are our promises to each other? What is our covenant? How did we get from Abraham and Sarah in the Jewish religion making a covenant with God to today at Community Church of New York, a Unitarian Universalist house of prayer for all people? Well, when Congregationalists first came to the United States, they each had a covenant for the churches that they planted. Now, these covenants were often very short, very sweet, to the point, and involved their promises to their community and to God. These were the forebearers of our own Unitarian Universalist churches. Now, one of the first churches that we have documentation of doing a covenant It's the church in Salem, Massachusetts. Their covenant was, "We covenant with the Lord and with one another, and do bind ourselves in the presence of God, to walk together in all his ways, according as he is pleased to reveal himself unto us in his blessed word of truth." Now, that is a very different covenant than what you will see in a Unitarian Universalist church. For example, we don't generally talk about God in our covenants. It's just not really a thing that we generally do. However, this does tell us a lot about what a covenant is, what it involves. And a covenant is basically three parts. It's the parties involved, what one party promises, and what the other party promises. So in the Salem, Massachusetts covenant, the parties were the community and God and the individual. And the things that they promised together were to walk together in all of God's ways, in the presence of God. And God promises to reveal himself to them in the texts and the words of truth, basically the scriptures that were existent in that time. So, three parts. Parties involved, promises to one another, and what the other person promises to the other. Now, in a modern day Unitarian Universalist church, we don't tend to make covenants to God. So what does a church covenant look like? What's the promise that we make to each other? I can read all the books in the world, listen to all the words of great people from many generations, and yet, can they tell me what our promise is to one another? Each person here has lived a long life that has brought them to this time, to this community of the Community Church of New York. Whether you are a first-time visitor or a lifelong member, you have found yourself here. You are a part of this congregation, even if it is only for this hour on this day. When you walk into a Catholic church for Mass on any day of the week, it does not matter where you have come from, you are welcome to listen, to hear the daily devotional. When you walk into this church, you can serve the community in any number of ways. You can be a part of this community. You can be a board member who takes care of the legacy of the church. You can be on the caring team that ministers to various people in the congregation, particularly those who are sick or homebound. In this time, many of us are homebound, and the caring team is helping graciously and intensely caring for all of us. What is our promise? You can find it in our bulletin every Sunday. A little while ago, I read it aloud to you. It is our unison affirmation. When we come into this space, when we say our covenant together, we are making a promise, even if it's just for an hour. We pledge the allegiance of our hands and our hearts. We promise to the Church Universal, to the church which does all of these things, which is a depository for all modern wisdom and the school of all modern thought. We promise to the Church Universal, which recognizes in all prophets a harmony, and in all scriptures a unity. We promise to the Church Universal, which abjures, which casts down all that separates and divides us, which always reaches towards humanity and peace. We promise to seek truth and freedom, justice and love, and to find our own individual purposes and discipline in our duty to one another and in our social duty to the world. We promise to make of all persons, sects, classes, nations, and races one beloved community. In the words of Lila Watterson, If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up in mine, then let us work together. This is our promise. We promise to get free together. We promise to help and heal ourselves and the world. And we promise to do it through this church. Even if you are a first-time visitor today, by your presence with us, we call upon you to get free and to bring everyone else with you. If you are a lifelong member, or this has become your home over months, years, decades, we call upon you to love this community into a more beautiful, more accepting, more transcendent group of people. Perhaps one of the most important parts of a covenantal community is that we are anchored not in a physical location, but in our promises to each other. During this time when we are trying out new ways of being in community together, let us remember that the physical location is not what keeps us bound up in one another. It is our promises to each other, and most importantly, our promises to do the good work of Community Church, a house of prayer for all people, with our hands and our hearts. Thank you.